Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard, where we set out to remember and celebrate the lives of those who lived to entertain us by visiting their final resting places. Today, we continue our tour of Orange County, where we'll find such stars as Carolyn Jones, William Hanna, Fender, Flo-Jo, and many more. Join us, won't you? In our last video, we kicked off our tour of Orange County. Today, we'll pick up where we left off, exploring several more cemeteries in the OC. If you haven't done so already, be sure to check out Part 1. We'll begin today at Melrose Abbey Memorial Park in Anaheim, which is just down the street from Disneyland. Melrose Abbey was founded in 1929, its namesake inspired by a monastery in Scotland. The crown jewel here is this beautiful Spanish mission-style chapel mausoleum. Let's head into the Abbey Mausoleum from the north side. Taking a right into Magnolia, we find the crypt of Marshal Stedman. He was an actor and director of the silent era. His career began on stage before discovering the new medium of moving pictures. On screen, he can be seen as King Ferdinand in The Coming of Columbus, and as Fatty in Three Black Eyes. As a director, he would helm films like A Motorcycle Adventure and A Romany Rose, which he also wrote. Marshall also taught drama, founding the Marshall Stedman School of Drama in Culver City, California. He lived to be 68. The next corridor down is the Sanctuary of Devotion. Here on the left, we find the niche of Barbara Reed. She was an actress in the 30s and 40s. Her big break was in the 1936 comedy Three Smart Girls. She's also remembered for playing Margot Lane in The Shadow Returns and The Missing Lady. Barbara died at age 45 from an apparent suicide. Back out to the outer wall of the mausoleum, along the bottom row, we find the final resting place of Carolyn Jones. Generations of fans of television's most creepy and kooky family will remember Carolyn as Morticia Addams, the very first to portray the Charles Addams cartoon character.
You remember our honeymoon, Gomez?
Who could forget our first night in Death Valley?
There was a stillness in the air.
Tish.
The moon was full, and that lovely, soft fluttering of bat wings. And that divine cave.
You're so romantic, Tish.
The Addams Family ran from 1964 to 1966, a short run for a show that has become an iconic part of the television landscape and has never been out of syndication. Before her defining role as Morticia Addams, Carolyn had an impressive movie career, seen in films like The Man Who Knew Too Much, King Creole alongside Elvis Presley, and The Bachelor Party, which earned her an Oscar nomination. Carolyn was just 53 when she died from cancer. She was cremated, her ashes entombed here with her mother. Let's head south out to the grounds to the Carnation Lawn. Here we find the grave of Jack Norworth. He was a songwriter who penned a number of Tin Pan Alley hits, perhaps most notably Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which he wrote with Albert von Tilzer in 1908. The song would become the official anthem of American baseball. Another song he's known for penning is Shine On Harvest Moon with wife Nora Bayes.
Oh, shine on harvest moon, up in the sky.
Jack was also an actor, appearing on vaudeville and as Jack in the Naggers series of short films in the 30s. Jack Norworth was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1970. He died from a heart attack at the age of 80. This memorial marker was placed here, not far from his actual grave, in 2010. 2 sections west is Paradise Garden. Here, under a tree, we find Robert Dudley. He began his career as a dentist before moving into motion pictures. He can be seen in over 100 productions throughout his career, beginning in the silent era. Among them are The Palm Beach Story, Son of Dracula, and Three Wise Girls. Robert Dudley lived to be 86. Moving on, our next stop is one of the most magnificent cathedrals in all of California, Christ Cathedral, also known as the Crystal Cathedral. The reflective glass building, the largest of its kind when it was built in 1980, is located in the Garden Grove area, part of the Catholic Diocese of Orange. On the grounds is a memorial garden where the faithful are laid to rest. Our first stop here is a man we've actually visited a couple times before, in special editions like our Viewers Special and our Disney Special. So, if you've seen those, you know who Thurl Ravenscroft is. For those who haven't, Thurl Ravenscroft was one of the most famous bass voices of his generation. For decades, he was the voice of Tony the Tiger, and as a singer, he can be heard in the Christmas classic, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch."
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
As well as in a number of Disney films and park attractions, including Pirates of the Caribbean, The Enchanted Tiki Room, and as a singing bust in the Haunted Mansion.
Creepy creeps with eerie eyes.
A distinctive feature on his niche here is this QR code, which you can scan to be taken to a memorial webpage for Ravenscroft. He lived to be 91. Turning north, we find a piano-inspired tomb, the eternal home of Roger Williams, considered one of the most popular pianists of the 20th century. He had a number of chart-topping hits like Autumn Leaves, and Born Free. Throughout his career, he would release dozens of gold and platinum albums and perform for 9 presidents. He would become the first pianist to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and his music can be heard in a number of film soundtracks, like Somewhere in Time. So popular was Roger Williams that Steinway made a limited edition gold grand piano, named after him. He died from cancer at age 87. Our next famous grave wasn't an entertainer, but she made sure starving artists like myself stayed fed. Marie Callender began selling pies with her husband in the 30s. The first official Marie Callender's pie shop opened in 1964, named after Marie here. It would gradually add more food, becoming a popular restaurant chain. In the 90s, Marie Callender's brand frozen food began appearing in store freezers, and subsequently in my freezer. Thank you, Marie, for the tasty treats. Just southeast in Santa Ana is Fairhaven Memorial Park. It was founded in 1911 to serve the needs of the Santa Ana area. In Lawn M, just next to the road, is Douglas Wrong-Way Corrigan. He was an aviator who garnered international fame in 1938 when he set out on a flight from New York to California, but ended up in Ireland. This earned him the moniker Wrong Way Corrigan. He claimed it was a navigational error and was truly surprised when he landed in Ireland, but some believe that this navigational error was deliberate, so he could make a transatlantic flight, which he had been denied permission to do. He returned to the States a hero, and even starred in a film about his life, The Flying Irishman. Wrong Way Corrigan lived to be 88. In the north end of the cemetery are the garden courts. Here we find the niche of Pamela Courson. She was the long-term companion and purported wife of legendary rock singer Jim Morrison of The Doors. They met when she was 19 and dated for around 5 years until his death. In 1971, Jim and Pamela went to Paris. In the early morning hours of July 3rd, Pamela found Jim dead in the bathroom. The cause was heart failure, believed to have been brought on by his drug use. Though they were never officially married, Jim's will named Pamela as his heir. 3 years later, in 1974, Pamela died from a heroin overdose in Los Angeles. Like Jim, she was also 27. The family apparently tried to have Pamela buried alongside Jim in Paris, but due to red tape constraints of having a body moved internationally for burial, she was cremated and inurned here as Pamela Morrison. Around the corner, in the Court of Prayer, above eye level, is Francis C. Hall. You guitar aficionados will know him as the man behind Rickenbacker. He started a radio and electronics store here in Orange County, which sold guitars and amps after World War II, including those made by Leo Fender. Wanting to carve his own path in amplified music, Hall bought the Rickenbacker Guitar Company from Adolph Rickenbacker, who had begun making electric guitars and amps with George Beauchamp in the 1930s. Hall would spearhead the modernization of the Rickenbacker guitar line, which would become a staple of rock and roll in the 50s on. Bands and artists like the Beatles, Tom Petty, Motorhead, and R.E.M. have all played Rickenbackers. Francis C. Hall lived to be 90. The section south of the courtyards is Lawn A. Here lies Fran Gerard. She was a model, Playboy's Playmate of the Month in March 1967. She's remembered for being the first Playmate to ever be shown wearing glasses, even though she didn't need them. Not much else is known about Fran, who sadly took her own life at the age of 37. Let's head to the middle of this lawn. This is the final resting place of Corrie ten Boom. She worked with her father as a watchmaker in Amsterdam when the Nazis invaded and occupied Holland during World War II. The ten Boom family opened their home to those in need of assistance. Particularly, they took in Jews and hid them from the Nazis. As part of the resistance movement, they were eventually caught and arrested. Corrie and her family were sent to prison, where her father died, and they were eventually taken to concentration camps. Corrie was released in late 1944. After the war, she wrote a best-selling book about her experiences, titled The Hiding Place, which would be made into a film in 1975. Corrie ten Boom settled in California, passing away on her 91st birthday. Just north, under a tree, rests Debbi Stone. Hers is one of the very rare but tragic stories of death at a theme park, specifically at Disneyland. She was working as a hostess there in the summer of 1974. But on July 8th, the happiest place on earth became the saddest, when she was killed after accidentally getting caught between the rotating wall of the America Sings attraction. She was just 18. After her death, the attraction was remodeled to prevent such an accident from happening again, and stricter safety measures were put in place. Moving on east now to Section J. Near the east side of the lawn, we find C.J. Pappy Hart. He was a pioneer of drag racing who helped create the first commercial drag strip in America. As drag racing grew in popularity after World War II, Hart worked to make it an organized sport, to charge admission and race on an unused runway at Orange County Airport, known as the Santa Ana Drag Strip. Pappy Hart was inducted into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame in 1991 and the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 1999. He lived to be 93. Continuing in toward the middle of this lawn, we find another one for you guitar aficionados, Leo Fender, a name that's become synonymous with the electric guitar. He opened the Fender Radio Service Company in the 1930s, then began to dabble with musical instruments, mainly guitars, basses, and amps. In 1946, he founded the Fender Electric Instrument Company, where he would be the first to design and market solid-body electric guitars. His Telecaster and Stratocaster guitars have become synonymous with rock and roll, played by legends like Jimi Hendrix, Keith Richards, and Kurt Cobain, and modern groups like Blink-182. Leo Fender was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992. Curiously, Fender never learned to play his namesake instruments. He lived to be 81. At the heart of the cemetery is the Fairhaven Mausoleum. Built in 1916, it was one of the very first mausoleums here in Orange County. And you'll be curious to know that in the 1950s, when Charlton Heston needed to record his voice of God for the Ten Commandments, he recorded parts of those lines of dialogue here because of the godlike quality of the acoustics.
For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground.
Left at the entrance at the end of the hallway in room 2 is the niche of actress Margaret Irving. You saw her as Mrs. Whitehead in the popular Marx Brothers film Animal Crackers, and as Mamie in Captain Calamity. On television, she's remembered for her long-running role as Aunt Gus in the 50s sitcom The People's Choice. Margaret lived to be 90. Back toward the entrance, in the alcove of remembrance, is the niche of Linda Cordova. She had a minor acting career in the 60s, She was a virgin sacrifice in Virgin Sacrifice, and made appearances on TV shows like The Untouchables and Have Gun Will Travel. She retired from acting in 1967 and lived to be 68. Over now into room 1 is the niche of Bessie Raiche, another famous aviator here in Orange County. She was the first woman in the United States accredited with flying an airplane solo, which she did on September 16, 1910. The flight was all the more impressive as she had no training or experience before her flight. Later in life, she would work as a physician. Bessie died from a heart attack in her sleep at age 56. Making our way now to the far south of the cemetery, to section AG. Here lies Clyde Bruckman. He was a writer and director, perhaps best remembered for his work in silent comedy. He directed and wrote for many of the legends of this era, like Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, W.C. Fields, Laurel and Hardy, and more. His films include Buster Keaton's The Cameraman and the General, Harold Lloyd's Movie Crazy, and Laurel and Hardy's The Battle of the Century. By the advent of television, he was out of work and out of money. With nowhere to turn, Bruckman borrowed a gun from Buster Keaton, claiming to need it for a hunting trip. He dined in a Santa Monica restaurant, then made his way to the restroom, where he shot himself in the head. The note he left read, "I have no money to pay for a funeral." Clyde Bruckman was 60. Years later, the X-Files would borrow from his life in the episode Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. Adjacent to Fairhaven is Santa Ana Cemetery. It's easier to walk there than to drive around to the separate entrance. Here in Section P, in the southeast, we find Richard Cromwell, whose real name was Roy Radabaugh. The boyishly handsome leading man of the 30s may be less remembered today, but was a star in his day. He's best remembered for his co-starring role alongside Gary Cooper in The Lives of a Bengal Lancer, and alongside Bette Davis in Jezebel. He also played the title character in 1942's Babyface Morgan. He joined the Coast Guard during the war, but afterwards found returning to film difficult. He was finally cast in the film The Little Shepherd of Kingdom Come, but after a cancer diagnosis was forced to withdraw. He died in 1960 at the age of 50. We now head several miles southeast to the Lake Forest area and Ascension Cemetery. It's a Catholic cemetery founded in 1965. Our first stop here is in Section A, just south of the office. Here lies Jean Vanderpyle. She was an actress best remembered in particular for her voice work. She was the voice of Wilma Flintstone in the landmark animated sitcom The Flintstones in the 1960s.
Oh, Wilma, do you think 20 Bronto burgers are enough?
For Fred, yes. We can eat something else.
She did voice work for a number of other Hanna-Barbera shows, including as Rosie the Robot on The Jetsons. Jean can also be seen in front of the camera, in shows like Leave It to Beaver and Petticoat Junction. She died from lung cancer at the age of 79. The Guardian Angel Mausoleum is near the end of this main road on the left. In the lawns south of the mausoleum, we find William Hanna. Bill here is the Hanna in Hanna-Barbera, one of the leading animation studios of the golden age of animation. He teamed up with Joseph Barbera to create Tom and Jerry cartoons in the 40s, the success of which allowed them to create Hanna-Barbera in 1957. They were pioneers of cartoons created for television, most notably The Flintstones, which was a Stone Age parody of The Honeymooners. It was the first animated show to find primetime success, paving the way for shows like The Simpsons. Other shows Hanna-Barbera produced include Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, The Jetsons, The Smurfs, and Scooby-Doo. Hanna-Barbera continued until 2001. Now Warner Brothers carries on the catalog. Bill Hanna died from cancer at age 90. Our next notable figure was once married to one of the most famous sports and entertainment figures of the 80s and 90s, but is sadly remembered for her tragic death and its aftermath. Nicole Brown Simpson met football legend and budding movie star O.J. Simpson in the early 80s. The two married in 1985. Less than a decade later, citing spousal abuse, the two divorced. On June 12, 1994, Nicole was found murdered, along with friend Ron Goldman, outside her Brentwood home. They had been stabbed multiple times. O.J. Simpson was arrested and charged in their murder, in what would become the most watched criminal trial of the century. Despite physical evidence that allegedly linked O.J. to the murders, he was eventually acquitted. In a later civil trial, O.J. Simpson was found liable for Nicole and Ron's deaths. Nicole was just 35 and rests here alongside her parents. The last cemetery we'll visit during our time here in Orange County is just a few minutes southeast, El Toro Memorial Park. The first section on the right is Los Alisos. All the way to the edge of the cemetery is legendary sprinter Flo-Jo, Florence Griffith Joyner, considered the fastest woman of all time. In 1988, she set a record time of 10:49 in the 100 and 21:34 in the 200. Both records stand to this day. Her record-setting speed and flashy style made her a global media sensation. She won a total of 3 gold and 2 silver medals at the 84 and 88 Olympics, and in 1995 was inducted into the USA Track and Field Hall of Fame. After the Seoul Olympics, she shifted her focus to art and design, creating the uniforms for the Indiana Pacers, as well as clothing and nail products. In the early 90s, Flo-Jo began suffering seizures caused by an undiagnosed cavernous hemangioma. In September of '98, Florence died in her sleep from asphyxiation after suffering a seizure. She was 38. Just across the street west, a few feet up the hill, is actress Marjorie Stapp. Her first big role came in the 1949 western The Blazing Trail. That same year, she starred as Queen Guinevere in The Adventures of Sir Galahad. From the 50s on, she'd make appearances on the small screen and in a number of B-movies like The Monster That Challenged the World. Her final screen appearance was in Columbo in 1991. Before acting, she actually worked as a receptionist for mob boss Bugsy Siegel. Marjorie lived to be 92. We're heading northeast now to Live Oak section. Here we find Ralph Reed Frito. As an actor, he's known for his many Western roles in the 50s and 60s, shows like Rawhide and The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp as Billy Clanton, and in movies like Lone Star as Bud Yoakum. Ralph retired from acting in the 60s and went into real estate. He lived to be 65. Across the street south is Old section. Meet Warren Foster. You may not know his name, but if you love classic cartoons, you likely know his work. He was a prolific writer of cartoons for decades. He began his career at Warner Brothers in the 30s, writing Porky Pig, Tweety Pie, and Bugs Bunny cartoons. He even co-wrote the Tweety Pie song, I Taught a Putty Tat.
I taught a putty tat a-tweepin' up on me. I taught a putty tat as plain as he could be.
At Warner's, he wrote some 170 cartoons, then made his way to Hanna-Barbera, writing for Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, and the Flintstones. Warren Foster lived to be 67. Finally, we head around to the west, to Centennial section. Up the hill a short ways is Gordon Jump. He's best remembered today for his role as station manager Arthur Carlson in the 70s and 80s sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati, as well as the incompetent police chief Tinkler on Soap, and as Ed Malone on Growing Pains. He also made guest appearances on shows like Different Strokes and Get Smart. Later in life, he took over from Jesse White as the Maytag repairman from 1989 until 2003. Gordon Jump died from pulmonary fibrosis in 2003 at the age of 71. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. You just never know who you might find when you're wandering a cemetery. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And look, down the hall. It's Beethoven. I kid, of course. Both of these composers are buried in Europe. These are just the names of the corridors here in the mausoleum.